Today we're going to be reflecting on your fantastic career, and we're going to talk about the evolution of the Australian Herbicide Resistance Initiative, which everyone knows as AHRI. And it's because you're about to hang up your hat, you're retiring next week. So it's very exciting, but it's been a long and really successful career. So we're going to reflect on your position as AHRI Director mostly in this interview. So firstly, how are you feeling about retirement, Steve?
Well, to be honest, Jessica, I'm a little bit mixed in mind about it. I've been working in the Australian grains industry for 50 years.
Yeah.
But it's also time. It's time to retire. We've got a great guy coming in to replace me as AHRI Director. I'm not retiring in its entirety, but I am retiring as AHRI Director, and it's time to do that. So,
yeah, certainly. So let's talk about your early life before we get into the details about how AHRI came about. Was agriculture something you were always interested in, Steve?
Yes, I was born on lived on a small dairy farm when I was young, and came from a quite poor family, and we ended up moving into a small town, and I left school when I was 15, and at 17 I started working in a produce grain mill, grain processing mill. So I've been involved in the Australian grains industry since I was 17 years old, starting off as a labourer.
From the very, basically the bottom rung, and you've climbed all the way to the top of the ladder essentially. Steve, that's pretty amazing. You left school at such a young age, and we're going to go over the history of your career. You've had positions in Adelaide as well, which I'll ask about next. But what was your next step from going from that lower kind of position where you started at 17? How did you make the next step to educate yourself, Steve?
Yes, well, for the first few years when I was in my late teenage years, I worked in various different roles in this grain processing, buying grain, processing grain, mainly for dairy farmers, for their rations for their dairy cows. But at the age 20, I realised that I didn't have any qualifications. I wanted to get an education, but it wasn't easy at all at that time. There were no pathways, and of course I'd left school at 15. But I found out about a little agricultural college called Tokau Agricultural College, which is near Maitland, which is near Newcastle, on the east coast of Australia. And I wrote to the principal and asked for an interview with him, and then went there, and he accepted me even though I didn't even have the qualifications to go there. And I went there for a year, and I really did work really hard. And I was dux, and I then got a special entry into what was then Hawkesbury Agricultural College, which is now the University of Western Sydney, where I did agriculture. So I was at Agricultural College there for 3 years, and I was the top student, and I won a Rotary scholarship, always indebted to Rotary, and won a Rotary scholarship to go to Michigan State University. So I did that when I was 25, and that was the first true university I had been to. And of course, once I started in university, I've never left.
You've been in the system ever since. That's right. And so was the next move then to Adelaide? No,
so then I did my master's degree. All of that had been in crop science at Hawkesbury and at Michigan State. But then I decided I really need to understand the physiology, biochemistry of how plants work. So I came back to Australia, to the Australian National University, did my PhD there in photosynthesis and biochemical physiology work, and then I went to a great postdoc at Stanford University in the US, California, and then to the University of Paris at Saclay in France. But during that time I was getting more and more into fundamental basic research, and I thought, wait a minute, this is not what I set out on this pathway to, and I was thinking about getting back into agriculture research, but what to do. And I started becoming aware, both in California and then in France, of plants, the very first cases of plants evolving resistance to herbicides. And I made the correct guess, as it turned out, that this was going to be a much bigger problem in the future. And I thought, well, I had a mix of crop science, agronomy skills, agricultural understanding, but also by then a fair bit of biochemistry. And of course, herbicides disrupt biochemistry. So I thought, I got the right skills, perhaps I should look into this, and I wrote a grant application to come back to Australia to work on resistance. And in fact, at that time, there was only one paddock or one field in Australia with resistance, and it was really just an academic problem. And I went to the University of Adelaide and started my career there, and then resistance, herbicide resistance in weeds, mainly ryegrass, exploded across southern Australia. Right. And it was a case of being in the right place at the right time.
Yeah, so in Adelaide, just for people playing along at home, so you worked as the Chief Executive Officer for the Australian Weed Management CRC in Adelaide. And did you have an inkling that you wanted to create a research group like AHRI at that time, or was it still kind of in its infancy in your work in resistance? What was you thinking at that time?
Well, I started as a lecturer at the University of Adelaide, and I built a big research team, and I was an associate professor with a big herbicide resistance team. And then these new entities called CRCs, or Cooperative Research Centres, came along in the 90s, and a whole lot of us applied for that, and I was the director of it. But that was taking me more and more into senior management, senior administration. I said, wait a minute, I still have a lot to do in research.
Sure.
I'm still very interested in the herbicide resistance area, and then through circumstances, GRDC said, well, wait a minute, we've got a problem in Western Australia. We've got a really major herbicide resistance problem affecting Western Australian farmers, and we've got this big group in Adelaide, and they basically cajoled me and said, go west and we'll look after you.
Yeah,
and
right.
They have been very true to their word, and so that was the genesis of starting what is now AHRI, from which I'm retiring in a week or so.
Yeah, it's very crazy. It's a crazy story. But AHRI, for those who haven't always been following the research group, because it has been around for a very long time, it wasn't always called AHRI, and it did start out as WARI, which had a more WA focus. Can you tell us a little bit about how WARI came about and the evolution of WARI when you started it?
Yeah, so GRDC recognised that they really needed to do something to help farmers with the resistance problem.
Yes.
That was really a major problem in Western Australia, and so the creation of the Western Australian Herbicide Resistance Initiative, and that started in 1998 when I moved from South Australia to Western Australia and started recruiting a team, a multidisciplinary team, to really tackle the resistance issues. And then over time, WARI became, of course, a much more national centre, and so the decision was made that it shouldn't just be the Western Australian herbicide, it should be the Australian Herbicide Resistance Initiative. So it in itself was an evolutionary process.
Certainly. Yeah. And you've had some of the colleagues that you've had over the years have been with you almost from the very start.
Yes.
The likes of Michelle Owen and also Xin Yu. Can you tell us a little bit about some of your experiences with the researchers and colleagues you've worked with?
Well, I've been very lucky. I was lucky in Adelaide. I've been very lucky here at the University of Western Australia to have bright, smart, motivated young people working with me. And that's, of course, a very refreshing thing to come to work every day. The people that are highly motivated, that are intelligent, that want to get on and do real things. And I've had, as you said, we've had some great staff and the fundamental research people like Yu Xing, she's an excellent researcher. Michael Walsh, now at the University of Sydney, but for a very long time the principal researcher in the agronomic and management areas, and many others. So it's been a really great 20 years.
It has been. And AHRI is well known for publishing many papers each year, but I was wondering what some of the memorable achievements or moments were for you over the last 20 years. So what sticks out for you as something really memorable that's happened during your time at AHRI?
Well, all scientists, and that's true for me as well, we all want to understand things at a fundamental level. But many scientists, they're quite happy working at that level, and of course it's already all-encompassing to do that. But there are some, and I'm one of them, that like to see the application of research as well as research. The wonderful French scientist Louis Pasteur said you shouldn't separate pure science from applied science, as you shouldn't separate the roots from the branches of a tree. And I believe that to be true. So in answer to your question, at the fundamental level, it has been a joy in my research career to understand how is it that plants can evolve resistance to these very powerful herbicides. And that, of course, is biochemistry and molecular genetics, and it's just like how bugs can develop resistance to antibiotics in human health, and it's a lot of fascinating science. We have had the privilege of having the time and the resources to focus to understand that.
Yeah.
But then at the applied level, it has been very gratifying, particularly all of the work that we call harvest weed seed control, which for many years was led in AHRI by Michael Walsh. And it's just been great to see the development of these practices, what we call harvest weed seed control. Many of them, in fact, discovered by farmers, worked on. Of course, one that comes to mind instantly is all our collaborative work with Ray Harrington, an extremely good farmer, formed a great alliance between a researcher, myself and Michael Walsh, and a great farmer. And it's just been the harvest weed seed control, seeing it adopted now across the country and starting internationally, very satisfying.
Yeah, it's great. And you are about to retire, as we've said at the beginning of the interview. So what's next for you, Steve? Will you be travelling? What's the plan?
Yes, well, I need to sort some of that out, Jessica. I'm retiring as AHRI Director, but I'm remaining 50% or half-time as a professor at the University of Western Australia, at least for the next 2 years. So I'm still continuing. I've got much to do in research, lots of papers that need to be written, so quite a bit to do there. Also, of course, want to help Hugh Becky be successful as the next AHRI Director. Hugh arrives from Canada in a week or so. He's a great fellow, and he'll do a great job, but I want to be there to help him. And also, I want to do some other things, as you say, so more travel with my wife Wendy. It's time to do some of those things, but I'm continuing with a range of activities. I'm also on the GRDC board, which will take quite a bit of time, and have some farmland. So there's plenty of things that I want to do, but I will not have the all-encompassing job of AHRI Director, and it's time for that to be the case.
For sure. Well, I'm probably one of the newest staff members, but having you as AHRI Director has been a pleasure, and it's been great working with you, and I wish you all the best in your future endeavours, and I'm sure, as you said, you'll still be on campus, so we'll still be seeing you around.
Yeah. Thank you, Jessica. I mean, you're an example of a fine young person that's just great to work with, and I wish you well, and I'm sure you're going to go very well and work well with Hugh Becky as the new Director.
Certainly. All right, thank you, Steve.